Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash. Cynthia Halloway screamed this as her white BMW X5 barreled toward my pregnant heifers. She laid on the horn, a shrill, urban sound that had no place out here, a sound that sliced through the peaceful morning air like a rusty knife. My girls, heavy with calf, startled. Their placid, cud-chewing peace shattered into a panic of wide eyes and clumsy, scrambling hooves. She thought because she drove a $60,000 piece of German engineering and ran the homeowners association for the new ticky-tacky subdivision next door, she owned my land. She thought her manicured nails and shrill corporate speak gave her right of way over 1,000 pounds of prize Angus beef. She was about to learn that in Texas, the deed is king, and my family's deed to Willow Creek Ranch had been king in this county since 1940. I spent $52,000 on concrete just to watch her life fall apart. And honestly, standing here now, listening to the quiet hum of the cicadas instead of the whine of her engine, I can tell you it was worth every single penny. It all started the way these things usually do, with progress, or what some people call progress. For 70-odd years, my family, the Mercers, had ranched this land. 50 acres of prime Texas pasture, bordered by a lazy, winding creek on one side, and nothing but open country on the other 3. My granddaddy bought it after the war. My daddy worked it his whole life, and now it was mine. I knew every dip and rise of this land like the lines on my own hand. The private dirt road leading from the main county blacktop to my homestead wasn't just a road. It was the artery of this ranch. The same path my dad's old Ford tractor had carved out decades ago. It was a mile long, cutting straight through my best grazing pasture, and it was mine. The survey maps at the county clerk's office, coated in a fine layer of dust and history, said so in no uncertain terms. Then came the bulldozers. A developer from Austin bought the 100-acre plot to the east of me, the one that had been fallow for as long as I could remember. In a matter of months, the mesquite and scrub brush were scraped away, replaced by a grid of paved streets and identical beige houses with pretensions of being Tuscan-inspired. They called it the Estates at Willow Creek, stealing the name of my creek to lend their soulless project a bit of borrowed authenticity. I didn't like it, but it was their land. I'm a firm believer in a man's right to do what he wants with his own property, so I just tipped my hat to the construction crews and went about my business. My first mistake. I should have known the kind of people who'd pay $500,000 for a house with a yard the size of a postage stamp, crammed up against a neighbor who could watch you brush your teeth, weren't my kind of people. The president of their newly formed HOA, Cynthia Halloway, made that abundantly clear on our very first meeting. She'd driven her gleaming white BMW down my private road, kicking up a rooster tail of dust that settled over my freshly washed truck. She got out, dressed in white linen pants that had no business being on a ranch, and looked at my homestead, the house my granddaddy built with his own 2 hands, like it was a particularly nasty bit of roadkill. "You must be Wyatt Mercer," she said, not offering a hand, just a tight, condescending smile. Her voice was all sharp angles. "I'm Cynthia Halloway, president of the Estates HOA." I was mending a fence post, and I didn't bother to get up. I just pushed my hat back. "Ma'am, that's a mighty fine car to be getting dusty on a private road." It was a gentle hint, the first of many. She either missed it or ignored it. "Yes, well, about this road. It's quite the convenient shortcut to the main highway, isn't it? We'll need to discuss paving it. The dust is a terrible nuisance for our residents, and the gravel is simply unacceptable for vehicles of a certain caliber." I slowly wrapped a length of wire around the post, pulling it taut with my pliers. I took my time, letting the silence stretch out. "Ma'am," I said finally, looking up at her, "this here is a private road on private property. It belongs to Willow Creek Ranch. It's not a shortcut. It's not a community asset. It's my driveway." Her smile tightened until it looked like it might crack her face. "Oh, bless your heart," she said, the 3 deadliest words in the Southern lexicon. "I think you'll find that as the community develops, certain accommodations will have to be made. We're a team here. We need to synergize our assets for a win-win outcome." I just stared at her. "The only win I'm interested in is my cattle staying safe and my property lines being respected. You and your residents are welcome to use the paved access road your developer built. It's a whole half-mile longer, I know, but it doesn't have a 2,000-pound bull standing in the middle of it." She let out a little huff of air, a sound of pure, unadulterated entitlement. "We'll see about that," she chirped, then turned on her heel, got back in her pristine SUV, and sped off, leaving another cloud of my own land to settle on my shoulders. That was the beginning. The polite warning had been issued and ignored. The battle lines were drawn, and she didn't even have the sense to see them. A week later, I found the first set of tire tracks that weren't mine cutting across the pasture. Clear evidence someone had driven off the road to get around my slow-moving herd. Then came the complaints. Phone calls at first. One of the new residents, a man who sounded like he'd never seen a cow up close, called to complain that my livestock were blocking the thoroughfare. I politely explained, again, that it was not a thoroughfare. It was my land. The next day, Cynthia called. "Wyatt, we have a problem. Your animals are creating a traffic hazard. You need to keep them contained." "Ma'am, they are contained, within the boundaries of my 50 acres. The road they're crossing is also within those 50 acres. "This is unacceptable," she snapped, her voice rising. "I have residents trying to get to their yoga classes. They can't be expected to wait for a herd of filthy animals to meander by." "Then they should use their own road," I said, my patience wearing thinner than a rusted-out barbed wire fence. I hung up. The next Saturday, I decided a more visual reminder was in order. I dragged an old, heavy-duty ranch gate across the entrance to my road, where it met the county blacktop, and wrapped a thick, case-hardened chain around it, securing it with a padlock the size of my fist. I hung a new, professionally printed sign right on it. "Private Ranch Road. No trespassing. Willow Creek Ranch. This means you." I figured that was clear enough for anyone, even someone who used words like synergize. It lasted less than 24 hours. Sunday morning, I drove out to check on it and found the chain cut clean through, the links lying in the dirt like a dead snake. The gate was pushed wide open. The padlock was gone. My sign had been spray painted over with a single, crude word. Anger, cold and sharp, went through me. This wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. This was a direct, deliberate violation. This was vandalism. I called the sheriff's department. A deputy, a young guy named Miller, who I'd known since he was in diapers, came out. He looked at the cut chain, looked at my deed and my survey map, and sighed. "It's clear-cut trespassing and destruction of property, Wyatt. The problem is proving who did it." "We both know who did it," I said, gesturing in the direction of the beige sea of houses. "Knowing and proving are two different things in a courtroom," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I can go over and have a talk with her, but without a witness or a camera, she'll just deny it." He was right, of course. So, I went to the hardware store and bought a new chain, a new padlock, and 2 trail cameras. I mounted one in a live oak overlooking the gate, and another further down the road, hidden in a cluster of cedars. The next time she trespassed, I'd have her. The footage I got over the next few weeks was infuriating. It was a parade of luxury cars, driven by people who looked at my no trespassing sign as if it were a suggestion they were entitled to ignore. And leading the parade, more often than not, was Cynthia Halloway in her white BMW. The camera caught her, clear as day, getting out of her car with a pair of bolt cutters and snipping the new chain. She did it with a smug little smile on her face, like she was swatting a fly. I saved the video file, time-stamped and dated. It was the first of many, 47 to be exact. My wife Sarah, a high school science teacher with more patience in her little finger than I have in my whole body, was worried. "Wyatt, this woman is unhinged," she said one night, watching me download another video of Cynthia leading a caravan of potential homebuyers down our road. "What are you going to do?" "I'm documenting," I said, my voice tight. "Every single time. Sooner or later, she's going to make a mistake she can't talk her way out of." That mistake came on a Tuesday morning in early May. I was moving a herd of my best heifers, all of them pregnant and due within the month, to the greener pasture on the other side of the road. It's a slow process. You can't rush a pregnant cow. They moved at their own pace, a slow, ambling river of black hide. I was on foot, walking with them, my best cow dog, Buster, trotting at my heels. That's when I heard it, the high-pitched whine of an engine being pushed too hard. Cynthia's BMW came flying over the rise in the road. She must have been doing 50. She didn't slow down. She saw the herd spread across the road in front of her, and instead of stopping, she did the single, stupidest, most malicious thing she could have done. She laid on the horn. The blast of sound hit the herd like a physical blow. Panic erupted. The cows, docile and slow a second before, scattered in a blind terror. They bolted, their heavy bodies moving with a speed that was unnatural and dangerous. One of them, a prize heifer my dad had named Daisy 12, the daughter of a champion bull, got tangled up with another cow. She went down, hard, her legs buckling under her. A horrible, guttural bellow of pain and fear tore from her throat. The rest of the herd stampeded right over her, their hooves churning the earth. That's when the hook scene happened. I ran, waving my arms, screaming, "Stop! You stupid, arrogant witch! Stop!" I put myself between her car and my downed heifer. She slammed on the brakes, her tires skidding in the dirt, stopping no more than 10 feet from me. The dust she kicked up was so thick I could taste it. She rolled down her window, her face a mask of fury. "Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash," she screamed, her voice cracking with rage. Something inside me, some last reserve of civility and neighborly patience, snapped. I walked slowly to her window, my hands clenched into fists. I was shaking with a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. "You listen to me," I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. "You just endangered my livestock. You just potentially cost me a $10,000 calf and its mother. This is the last time. This is your final warning. You ever drive on this road again, and you will regret it for the rest of your life. This is no longer a discussion. This is a promise." I didn't wait for a reply. I turned my back on her and went to my downed heifer. Cynthia sat there for a long moment. Then, with a screech of tires, she threw the car in reverse, spun a 3-point turn that tore up my pasture, and fled. Daisy 12 was in a bad way. Her leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and she was breathing in shallow, panicked gasps. The vet, old Doc Simmons, came out and confirmed my fears. A badly broken leg, and, worse, the stress and the fall had sent her into premature labor. We lost the calf. Doc managed to save Daisy, but her breeding days were over. She'd walk with a limp for the rest of her life. The cost, the vet bills, the lost calf, the loss of a prime breeding heifer, was close to $15,000. But the real cost was the last shred of my willingness to be reasonable. The polite rancher was gone. In his place was a man with a singular, cold purpose. Cynthia Halloway had started a war. I was going to finish it. The day after Daisy 12 lost her calf, a process server showed up at my door. He was a skinny kid in a cheap suit, looking nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. He handed me a thick envelope. "You've been served, Mr. Mercer." I took the papers and thumbed through them. It was a lawsuit. Cynthia Halloway and the Estates at Willow Creek Homeowners Association were suing me. They were demanding the court declare my private road a public easement by necessity, and were seeking an injunction to force me to remove any and all gates or obstructions. They were also suing me for damages, claiming my unreasonable obstruction had lowered their property values. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. She injures my livestock, costs me thousands of dollars, and then she sues me. I walked back inside, the papers feeling heavy and toxic in my hand. Sarah was at the kitchen table, grading papers. She looked up, saw my face, and her own expression fell. "What is it?" "She's suing us," I said, dropping the lawsuit on the table, "for blocking public access to our own driveway." Sarah read the first page, her eyes widening. "She can't be serious. Public access? Wyatt, your granddaddy carved that road himself." "Being serious and being right are two different things," I said, a grim feeling settling in my gut. "This is going to get expensive." Sarah put her hand over mine. Her hands were always steady. "We'll fight it. We have the deeds. We have the truth on our side." She paused, her gaze searching mine. "But you're planning something else, aren't you? Something more than just fighting a lawsuit." She saw the cold fire in my eyes, the look I got when a predator was circling the herd. She didn't flinch. She just nodded slowly. "Good." That one word was all I needed. It was permission. It was a partnership. We were in this together. The paper war had begun, but I was already planning a campaign that went far beyond legal filings. My first stop was the county clerk's office. It's a dim, quiet place in the basement of the old courthouse, smelling of aging paper and dust. I spent the better part of 2 days there, hunched over massive, leather-bound books of deeds and surveys, my fingers tracing property lines drawn in faded ink. I found it, finally. The original 1940 survey map for my family's property. It was a beautiful piece of cartography, clear and precise. It showed the 50-acre parcel, the creek, and the dotted line of the access road, all contained squarely within the property boundaries of Willow Creek Ranch. Crucially, I found the deed for the adjacent parcel, the one Cynthia's subdivision was built on. It explicitly mentioned its access was via the newly planned County Road 28B on its eastern edge. There was no mention, not a word, not a hint of any easement, right-of-way, or access across the Mercer property. I had the smoking gun. I paid for certified copies of everything. Armed with irrefutable proof, I thought the legal battle would be a straightforward, albeit expensive, nuisance. But Cynthia wasn't just fighting in the courts. She was fighting dirty. The following week, a shiny truck from the Environmental Protection Agency pulled up my road. 2 inspectors in crisp uniforms got out, holding a clipboard. "Mr. Mercer, we've received an anonymous complaint about illegal dumping of hazardous materials into Willow Creek," the lead inspector said, his face stern. I almost laughed. "Hazardous materials? Sir, the most hazardous thing that goes into that creek is cow manure, and that's been happening for the better part of a century. It's called nature." They were humorless. They insisted on a full inspection. I spent the next 4 hours walking them over every inch of my property. They took water samples from the creek, soil samples from the pasture, and peered into my barn. They found nothing, of course, not a single violation. As they were leaving, the younger inspector lingered a bit. He looked embarrassed. "Look, Mr. Mercer," he said quietly, "off the record, the complaint mentioned unregulated chemical runoff from animal processing. It sounded professionally written, like someone knew which buzzwords to use to trigger a mandatory inspection." "I think I know the author," I said dryly. 2 days later, it was the county health department. Another anonymous tip. This time about unsanitary conditions and improper disposal of animal carcasses, alleging a risk to public health. Again, 2 officials, another wasted afternoon. They inspected my well, my septic system, and the small fenced-off area where we bury an animal if one passes from natural causes, a practice as old as ranching itself and perfectly legal. They also found nothing. The lead official, a woman I knew from the local feed store, rolled her eyes as she handed me the all-clear report. "This has Halloway written all over it, Wyatt. She's just trying to harass you with paperwork." The harassment escalated. She took her fight to the media. The local news channel ran a segment on the evening news. It was a masterpiece of manipulative framing. There was Cynthia, looking concerned and professional, standing in front of the manicured entrance to her subdivision. "We're just a community of families seeking the safe, convenient access to our homes that we were promised," she said, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "Unfortunately, one individual, Mr. Wyatt Mercer, is holding an entire community hostage, blocking a vital road out of what appears to be pure spite." They cut to a shot of my gate, the no trespassing sign looking menacing. Then a shot of me, taken from a long lens without my knowledge, looking angry as I was herding cattle, the day her reckless driving had caused the stampede. They didn't mention that part, of course. I was portrayed as the villain, the stubborn, backwards redneck standing in the way of progress and family values. My phone started ringing with calls from people I didn't know, telling me what a horrible person I was. That was when I knew defending wasn't enough. I had to go on the offensive. The key came from an unlikely source. Eddie, our mailman. Eddie had been delivering mail on this route for 30 years. He knew everyone and everything. He was a walking, talking repository of local gossip, and he hated entitled city folk with a passion. He pulled up one afternoon, his mail truck groaning under the weight of the usual junk mail and bills. He handed me my stack of letters, but didn't leave right away. He leaned out his window, his expression conspiratorial. "Wyatt," he said, lowering his voice, "this Halloway woman, you know she's in deep, right?" "What do you mean, deep?" "Deep in debt," Eddie whispered, glancing around as if spies were lurking in the hay bales. "Nasty divorce from some tech millionaire in Austin. Word is, she got taken to the cleaners. Had to finance this whole HOA president/developer shtick on a mountain of loans. She's upside down, big time." My ears perked up. This was interesting. Go on. "The thing is," Eddie continued, warming to his subject, "I deliver the mail to the new sales office for the estates. I see the marketing packets. I hear the sales pitches when I drop off packages. He leaned closer. She's promising them access, Wyatt. It's in the brochures. Exclusive ranch road access for a quicker commute. She's selling your road as a luxury amenity. It's part of the contract. Everything clicked into place. The lawsuit, the harassment, the desperation. It wasn't about convenience. It was about fraud. She had sold a lie to dozens of homebuyers. Her entire financial future was bet on her ability to bully me into giving up my road. If she couldn't deliver that exclusive access, her sales contracts could be voided. She wouldn't just lose the lawsuit, she'd face a dozen more from angry homeowners. She'd be bankrupt, ruined. That's when I knew I had her. I leaned against the mailbox, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. It was the first time I'd smiled in weeks. Eddie, I said, you're a good man. He just grinned. Just delivering the mail, Wyatt. Just delivering the mail. That night, I laid it all out for Sarah. The deeds, the survey maps, the time-stamped videos of the trespassing, the failed EPA and Health Department reports, and now, the final piece of the puzzle. Cynthia's massive, fraudulent gamble. She's trapped, I said, pacing the living room floor. She's built her entire house of cards on my land, and she thinks she can bully me into holding it up for her. But she's overextended. She's desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. So what's your plan? Sarah asked, her eyes following me. You've got the evidence to win the lawsuit, but you said you wanted more. Winning the lawsuit just means we're back to where we started, I said. She'll still be next door. She'll still be a problem. No, I'm not just going to win. I'm going to let her completely and utterly destroy herself. I'm going to give her all the rope she needs to hang her own fraudulent career. I stopped pacing and looked at her. I'm going to build a wall. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, a wall? Like a real wall? A real wall, I confirmed. A big, ugly, permanent, legally untouchable wall. Right where the gate is now. A monument to her stupidity. This was the moment of truth. This was where I moved from defense to overwhelming, disproportionate force. This was the pro-revenge I had been formulating. My wife, the calm, rational science teacher, looked at the mountain of evidence on our coffee table, looked at the cold fury in my eyes, and a slow smile spread across her face. How much is this wall going to cost? She asked. Probably a lot. Okay, she said. When do they start? The fallout from the bogus EPA and Health Department inspections and the smear piece on the local news was exactly what Cynthia had intended. It made my life a living hell for a couple of weeks. But what she didn't count on was that it also hardened my resolve from simple steel into pure tungsten. She thought she was isolating me, painting me as the villain. What she was really doing was giving me a public relations platform for the fireworks to come. After Eddie the mailman gave me the final piece of the puzzle, the fact that she was actively committing fraud by selling access to my road, I knew I held all the cards. It wasn't about a shortcut anymore. It was about her entire empire, flimsy as it was, being built on a foundation of lies with my property as the cornerstone. And I was about to pull that stone right out from under her. And that is how a $52,000 wall, paid for with funds I'd set aside for a new prize bull, became the best investment I ever made. If you're enjoying watching this HOA nightmare get a taste of her own medicine, go ahead and smash that like button. Stick around by subscribing, because this is where the real construction and destruction begins. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to deal with a neighbor who thought your property was part of their personal kingdom. The first phone call I made was to a man known simply as Big Mike. Big Mike ran a construction company that specialized in agricultural and industrial jobs. He was a mountain of a man with a grip like a hydraulic press and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He'd built barns and feedlots for my dad, and his reputation was as solid as the concrete he poured. More importantly, Big Mike had a legendary, almost poetic hatred for entitled, bossy people. I met him at the site, by the spray-painted chain-cut gate. I laid out the whole story, showing him the certified survey map. He listened patiently, chewing on a piece of unlit cigar, his eyes narrowed. "So this Holloway woman," he rumbled, his voice like gravel turning in a mixer. "She cuts your lock, harasses your cows, and sues you for using your own land." "That's the short version," I said. "And now you want to put a stop to it. A permanent stop." "I want to build a statement, Mike. I want something that says, this far and no further. I want something a BMW can't get through. I want something a tank would have second thoughts about." A slow, appreciative grin spread across Big Mike's face. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "I like your style, Wyatt. We can do that. I'm thinking a 12-foot-high agricultural security barrier, steel-reinforced concrete, 12-inch thickness, with a 3-foot-deep foundation. Legally, since it's for livestock security and asset protection on agricultural zoned land, the permit is a formality. She won't be able to touch it. What's it going to run me?" He did some quick calculations on a notepad he pulled from his shirt pocket. "For a 30-foot section, enough to block this whole entrance, with a heavy-duty industrial steel slider gate set right into the concrete, you're looking at about $52,000. I didn't even blink. That was the money from the sale of 2 of my best yearlings, plus the bull fund. "When can you start?" "That's the best part," Big Mike said, his grin widening. "I got a crew finishing up a job Thursday. We can have the excavation done and the forms up Friday. Pour the concrete Saturday morning." My own smile matched his. "Friday? That's perfect." I knew from Eddie that Cynthia was planning a huge open house weekend to sell the last few lots in her development. She'd be parading potential buyers up and down my road, promising them the world. "Let's do it," I said, shaking his massive hand. "Send me the invoice." Friday morning arrived with the kind of glorious golden sunrise that usually filled me with peace. This time, it filled me with a sense of impending, righteous satisfaction. At 6 a.m. sharp, the cavalry arrived. Not 1 or 2 pickup trucks, but a full-scale assault team of heavy machinery. A backhoe, a bulldozer, and 2 massive flatbeds carrying steel rebar and wooden forms rumbled to a stop at the entrance to my road, their diesel engines a roaring chorus of progress. My kind of progress. Big Mike was there, directing the operation like a seasoned general. "All right, boys, you heard the man. We're building a monument." The backhoe's bucket bit into the earth with a satisfying crunch, tearing out the dirt where Cynthia Holloway's tires had passed just the day before. The noise was incredible. The ground shook. It was beautiful. It didn't take long for the beast to awaken. Around 7:30 a.m., the white BMW X5 came screeching to a halt on the county road. Cynthia jumped out, this time in a pink tracksuit that did nothing to soften her shrewish demeanor. Her face was a mottled red, a mixture of shock and pure rage.
"What is the meaning of this?"
she shrieked over the roar of the backhoe. "What are you doing?" I was leaning against the fender of my truck, drinking coffee from a thermos. I took a slow sip before answering. Morning, Cynthia. We're just making some security upgrades. Can't be too careful these days. You can't do this. I have an open house this weekend. I have clients coming. You are blocking a public road. Big Mike lumbered over, wiping his hands on a rag. He was a good foot taller than her and about 3 times as wide. He looked down at her like she was a yapping poodle. Ma'am, this here is a permitted, private construction project on private land. Now, I'd appreciate it if you'd step back. My insurance doesn't cover folks standing in the way of progress. I'm calling the police. I'm calling my lawyer. You will be hearing from my lawyer, she screamed, stabbing a finger at him. You do that, ma'am, Mike said, turning his back on her and bellowing at the work crew. Let's get that rebar laid in. She did call the police. Deputy Miller showed up again about 30 minutes later, looking tired. Wyatt, what in the Sam Hill is going on? Cynthia ran up to his car. Officer, thank God. This man is illegally constructing a barricade on a public thoroughfare. I want him arrested. I calmly walked over and handed Miller a folder. Inside was a copy of my deed, the certified survey map, and the freshly signed permit for a 30-foot agricultural security barrier. Miller read through the documents, his expression unreadable. He walked over to the edge of the trench my crew had dug, looked at the property marker stake that was still clearly visible, and then looked back at Cynthia. Ma'am, he said, his voice flat and official, according to these legally filed documents, this is Mr. Mercer's private property. The construction appears to be fully permitted. He's within his rights. There's nothing I can do. What do you mean there's nothing you can do? He's ruining my business. This is a civil matter, ma'am, Miller said, already getting back into his patrol car. I suggest you take it up with your lawyer, like you said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual crimes to attend to. Y'all have a good day. He tipped his hat to me and drove off, leaving Cynthia standing in a cloud of dust and impotent fury. Her open house was a disaster. All day Friday and Saturday, a steady stream of prospective buyers in expensive cars would pull up, see the massive construction site, the roaring machinery, the half-finished concrete wall, and the enormous private property signs we had posted. They'd see Cynthia standing there trying to explain it away, her voice getting more shrill and desperate with each passing car. Most of them just turned around and left. A few got out and argued with her. I saw one man angrily waving a sales brochure in her face, jabbing his finger at what I could only assume was the part that promised them exclusive ranch road access. By Saturday afternoon, the wall was poured. A solid 30-foot wide, 12-foot high slab of brutalist gray concrete. It was glorious. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever built. Big Mike's crew was installing the gate, a black industrial-grade sliding steel gate that weighed close to a ton. It was set on a heavy-duty track, a fortress door in my fortress wall. That's when Cynthia finally snapped. She had been watching from her car for the last hour, her face pale. The last of her potential buyers had just sped off in a cloud of disgust. She had lost. The contracts were worthless. The lie was exposed. Her financial ruin was staring her in the face in the form of 12 feet of solid concrete. She started her engine. The BMW's motor revved, a high-pitched scream of frustration. And then she did it. She floored it. The white SUV shot forward, tires spinning on the asphalt, and aimed directly for the center of the new steel gate. It was a primal, mindless act of rage, a $60,000 temper tantrum. The impact was sickening, not for the gate, but for the car. There was a deafening crunch of metal and plastic, a tinkle of shattering glass. The BMW, a vehicle designed for navigating Starbucks drive-thrus, crumpled like a tin can against the unyielding, immovable ton of solid American steel. The airbag deployed with a loud thump. The engine sputtered, hissed, and died. Steam poured from the buckled hood. Silence. Big Mike and his crew just stood there, staring. One of them let out a low whistle. "Well," Big Mike said, spitting his cigar out, "I guess that's one way to test the build quality." He walked over, inspected the gate, and ran his hand over the spot where the BMW had hit. There wasn't a scratch, not a dent, not even a chip in the paint. "She's solid, Wyatt. Even a tank ain't getting through this." A tow truck had to be called. It was a slow, humiliating process. They hooked up the mangled remains of her status symbol and dragged it away, leaving a trail of coolant and broken plastic on the road. Cynthia got a ride with the tow truck driver, her face ashen, her shoulders slumped in utter defeat. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. The wall was finished. The physical barrier was sealed. But I wasn't done yet. The final act was still to come. I had built the stage. Now it was time for the public execution. The physical battle was won, but the war for public opinion and legal finality was yet to be fought. Cynthia, despite her spectacular and costly failure at the gate, was not the type to go down quietly. Defeated and humiliated, she doubled down on her legal and political attacks. Her last, desperate gambit was to try and force the town to tear down my wall. She managed to get an item placed on the agenda for the next town hall meeting, scheduled for 2 weeks later. The agenda item read, "Discussion and action regarding the illegal and obstructive barricade on the unnamed access road to the estates at Willow Creek." She was trying to frame my legally permitted wall as some rogue structure and bully the town council into intervening on her behalf. This was the opening I had been waiting for. This wasn't going to be a quiet meeting in a judge's chambers. This was going to be a public forum. Her chosen battlefield was about to become her execution ground. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing my offensive. First, I had my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense man named Tom Jacoby, draft cease and desist letters to Cynthia and the HOA, along with a formal notice of my intent to countersue for property damage, harassment, and the veterinary bills for Daisy 12. But we held off on sending them. The timing had to be perfect. Next, I went on an information-gathering mission. With a little help from Eddie the mailman's observations and some discreet inquiries, I managed to get the names of 3 of the families who had recently purchased homes in the estates. I found them on social media, their posts full of excitement about their new country living and the quick commute. I sent each of them a polite, carefully worded letter. I introduced myself as their neighbor, the owner of Willow Creek Ranch. I included a copy of my property survey and a simple, friendly question. Were you, by any chance, promised access to this private ranch road as part of your purchase agreement? I invited them to the upcoming town hall meeting to discuss the matter, suggesting it was of vital importance to their investment. Finally, I called the local news station. I spoke to the same reporter who had run Cynthia's smear piece. "This is Wyatt Mercer," I said. "I saw your story a few weeks ago. You presented one side of a story. I'd like to offer you the other side, complete with documented evidence, videos, and a rather dramatic conclusion. Be at the town hall meeting on Tuesday night. You'll want your cameras rolling." The reporter, smelling a follow-up story with conflict and drama, eagerly agreed. The night of the town hall meeting, the room was packed. The usual crowd of civic-minded retirees was there, but they were joined by a large contingent of residents from the estates, all looking confused and anxious. My 3 invited families were sitting in the front row, looking grim. The news camera was set up in the back. I sat with Sarah in the second row, a heavy briefcase on my lap. Sarah gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. The meeting droned on with the usual business, zoning variances, budget approvals. Then, Mayor Thompson, a decent man I'd known for years, announced the final agenda item. Next up, a discussion regarding the structure on the access road to the estates at Willow Creek. Ms. Halloway, you have the floor. Cynthia strode to the podium, dressed in a severe navy blue power suit, her face a mask of practiced indignation. She had a new car, I noticed, a slightly less expensive Lexus SUV. The insurance payout must have come through. She launched into a passionate, pre-rehearsed speech, casting herself as the champion of the people. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and my dear neighbors, she began, her voice quivering with ersatz emotion. We came to this beautiful area seeking peace, community, and a safe place to raise our families. We invested our life savings based on the promise of that community. But that promise has been shattered by the selfish, illegal actions of one man. She pointed a dramatic finger at me. Wyatt Mercer has erected a monstrous 12-foot concrete wall, cutting off a vital access road, endangering our residents by slowing emergency vehicle response times and holding our entire community hostage to his whims. This wall, she spat the word, is a blight on our town and a symbol of one man's arrogant refusal to be a good neighbor. We are asking the council tonight to declare this structure illegal and order its immediate removal for the good of the entire community. She finished to scattered, uncertain applause from some of the estate's residents she'd whipped into a frenzy. She shot me a triumphant, venomous glare as she returned to her seat. Mayor Thompson looked at me. Mr. Mercer, do you have a response? I do, I said calmly. I walked to the podium, placed my briefcase on it, and clicked it open. I didn't look at Cynthia. I looked at the council, at the camera, and at the worried faces of the homeowners she had duped. Mr. Mayor, council members, neighbors, I started, my voice steady. Ms. Halloway has said a lot of things. She's used words like community, safety, and illegal. I prefer to deal in facts. I pulled out a large, poster-sized printout and set it on an easel. It was the 1940 survey map. Fact 1, I said, pointing with a pen. This is the official, certified survey map of my property, Willow Creek Ranch, on file at the county courthouse. As you can see, the road in question is located entirely within the boundaries of my private land. It is not, and has never been, a public road. I replaced the map with another poster. Fact 2. This is the deed for the property now known as the Estates at Willow Creek. It makes zero mention of any easement or right-of-way across my land. Its legal access is clearly designated as County Road 28B. A murmur went through the crowd. The faces of the estate's residents were starting to shift from confusion to suspicion. Miss Halloway calls my wall illegal, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Fact 3. I held up the permit. This is a building permit, issued by this very county, for an agricultural security barrier on agriculturally zoned land. It is 100% legal. Now I turn my attention to the core of her argument. She talks about being a good neighbor. For months, I tried to be a good neighbor. I politely asked her and her residents not to use my private road. In response, she encouraged them to trespass. When I put up a locked gate, she was filmed, on camera, repeatedly cutting the chain. I have a short video I'd like to show you. I nodded to the town clerk, who had agreed to help me. The lights dimmed, and the big screen behind the council lit up. It was the crystal clear trail cam footage. The screen showed Cynthia Halloway, her face a mask of smug entitlement, snipping my lock with a pair of bolt cutters. Gasps rippled through the audience. I played another clip. And another. 47 videos I had, but 2 were enough. This, I said as the lights came up, is not the action of a good neighbor. This is the action of a criminal. But it gets worse. My voice dropped, becoming cold and hard. She talked about safety. On May 12th, Miss Halloway sped down my road and drove directly into my herd of pregnant cattle, laying on her horn and causing a stampede. A prize heifer was trampled. Her leg was broken and she lost her calf. This is a vet bill for nearly $3,000 and evidence of a total loss of over $15,000. The room was silent now. The homeowners she'd been championing were staring at her with open hostility. But why? I asked the room. Why all the desperation? Why the lies, the vandalism, the endangerment of livestock? I'll tell you why. I picked up a glossy sales brochure from my briefcase, one of the ones an angry homeowner had given me in the parking lot. Because Cynthia Halloway is a fraud. I held up the brochure. Exclusive ranch road access for a quicker commute. A luxury amenity. She sold you a lie. She sold you access to my land, land she has never had any right to. She based her contracts, her business, her entire financial future on her ability to steal from me. And when I refused to be stolen from, she harassed me, she slandered me, and she sued me. The 3 homeowners I had contacted were on their feet now. She told us that road was part of the deal, one of them shouted, pointing at Cynthia. It's in our contract. Chaos erupted. The room was a sea of angry voices, all directed at the woman in the navy blue suit, who was now ashen-faced and trembling. That was my lawyer's cue. Tom Jacoby, who had been sitting quietly at the back, stood up and walked to the podium. He handed a file to Mayor Thompson and another to the news camera operator. For the record, he announced, his voice cutting through the noise, we have here an affidavit from one of these homeowners confirming that access was a contractual obligation. We also have copies of Ms. Halloway's fraudulent marketing materials. He then turned and walked over to where 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies, including my old friend Deputy Miller, had quietly entered the room and were standing by the door. He handed them a thick file. Officers, he said loudly, this file contains evidence of repeated criminal trespass, destruction of property, and, most significantly, felony contract fraud. I believe you'll find it makes for compelling reading. That was the checkmate. Deputy Miller and his partner walked through the stunned crowd, straight towards the podium where Cynthia Halloway stood, frozen in a state of shock. Cynthia Halloway, Miller said, his voice ringing with authority in the suddenly silent room. You are under arrest for fraud. The handcuffs clicked. It was a small, sharp sound that echoed like a gunshot. The news camera zoomed in, its red light a merciless eye. The flashbulbs popped, capturing her face at the precise moment her world imploded. Utter, complete, and public defeat. And I just stood there, leaning against the podium, my arms crossed. I didn't smile. I didn't have to. The sight of her being led away in handcuffs, her carefully constructed facade shattered into a million pieces, was satisfaction enough. I had done more than just win a dispute over a road. I had exposed a predator, and justice, delivered via a ton of concrete and a ream of paper, had been served. They say good fences make good neighbors, but sometimes you need a 12-foot concrete wall to make a felon. The aftermath was swift and total. Cynthia Halloway's arrest at the town hall meeting was the lead story on the 10 o'clock news. The footage of her in handcuffs, juxtaposed with the trail cam video of her cutting my lock and the damning sales brochure, was played on a loop for days. Her empire, built on debt and deceit, crumbled overnight. She was hit with a tidal wave of lawsuits from the homeowners she had defrauded. Faced with irrefutable evidence, her sales contracts were declared null and void. She had to return their deposits, but she'd already spent most of the money servicing the massive loans she'd taken out. The bank foreclosed on the remaining unsold properties. She declared bankruptcy within a month. The criminal charges stuck too. With multiple victims and the clear evidence of premeditation, she pleaded guilty to felony fraud to avoid a longer sentence. She got 2 years in state prison and a decade of probation. The estates at Willow Creek went into receivership and was eventually bought by a more reputable developer, who, as their first order of business, sent me a letter formally apologizing for the actions of their predecessor and assuring me they would be using their own legal access road. My life, on the other hand, returned to a glorious state of peace and quiet. The wall stands to this day, a silent, gray monument at the end of my road. Most people don't even know the story behind it. They just see it as a peculiar, overly robust piece of ranch infrastructure. But I know what it is. It's a $52,000 receipt for a lesson in property rights. It's a headstone for one woman's arrogance. Sarah and I sometimes sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the pasture, and the silence is the sweetest sound in the world. No whining engines, no shrill horns, no condescending voices talking about synergy, just the lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, and the gentle Texas breeze. Daisy 12's leg healed, and while she never carried another calf, she lives out her days as the undisputed, limping queen of the pasture. Every time I look at that wall, I don't see the money I spent. I see the peace I bought, and it was worth every single penny. And that is how a $52,000 wall saved my ranch and sent a fraudster to jail. If you love seeing entitled nightmares get a dose of concrete justice, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories from the ranch. Have you ever had a neighbor from hell? Tell me in the comments. I've got a feeling my story isn't the only one out there.